We're so excited to hear just more about your guys' story and your partnership and everything today, but why don't we get started by, Mark, just tell us a little bit more about Liberty Press, what it is, and kind of how it got started.
Well, we had the Utah County Journal. The beginning was named Shopper's Guide. I'm my oldest brother. I'm one of 7 brothers, and we've worked together our entire career. And if you want to know what your character is like, work with 7 brothers for 40 years. Then you will know if you have good or bad character, trust me, because they will reveal it for you if you don't. But we had a company called the Shopper's Guide, and we would print that publication in Twilla. And after a little while, we bought a press to print the publication, and that was how Liberty Press started. And I got hired involuntarily. My dad came to me and said, "You're going to work." And I said no, because I was involved in sports, and my life's dreams were not working in a printing company.
How old were you at that time?
I was 14. And my dad had a heart attack, so he was not working. And so the reason for us going to work was more essential than just trying to teach me how to work. It was, you need a job. And so I basically missed half of my schooling. Starting in 8th grade, I missed like 80 or 90 days of school working at Liberty Press. And after the first year, I started out at the bottom. I was the guy that took the paper off the press. They call it a flyby. And that was my job. But 1 year later, when the head pressman graduated and moved back to California, I became the head pressman. So at 15, I was the guy running the show. And the way it works in a press room, if you don't get done, you just keep working, right? If you don't get done 8 hours, and so my brothers would come in and say, "Boy, this night crew looks a lot like the day crew," you know? And since I was getting paid 0, at that time, they'd say, "We're going to give you a 100% raise. You're just killing it." And 100% of 0 is 0. And so for a long time, I worked on the plan of the family plan, meaning help the family. But by the time I was 17-ish, Liberty Press had grown into a company that did a lot of printing on its own, and I was the boss. No one ever proclaimed me as the boss. I just hired people, fired people. It just sort of happened. And I will tell you one fun thing. When my family finally decided to pay me, they were just in shock because how many hours I was working. So they said, "You know, we're going to pay you." They were all proud of this. "We're going to start paying you." So I get my first paycheck, and my brother was going, "There's not even that much time. How are you working this many hours?" Well, I tell you, as an adult, you're called a workaholic. As a kid, you're respected. If you work 100 hours, 120 hours, people are like, "What a guy." If you do that as an adult, everyone goes, "He's a workaholic. He's a loser. You know, he needs to go home and have a family." So it's a whole change, not a change in what you do. But they were like trying not to pay me this check because they go,
"It's too much.
How could this be?" And I go, "Well, you know, when you leave at night and go home, and then you come back the next morning and I'm here, I didn't beat you to work. I didn't go home." So for a number of years, the night the paper came out, the once a week was on Wednesday. So Tuesday night we'd print the paper. And I don't remember ever between 14 and my mission that I went to bed on a Tuesday night. It would just start printing about 4 o'clock, and it would end the next day at about 4 o'clock. We'd have it printed, and I just never went to bed. But no one really thought about it. When you're young, it's like, right on, baby. You know, just go for it. So it made me learn how to work. You know, it was good. It was good in many ways. And the faster we get at it, the quicker I get to go home. So that was nice. But it meant I missed every Wednesday, you know, for school. I did that in 8th and 9th grade. I missed about half the school. When I got to 9th grade, I remember going into a meeting with the school board, and they didn't want me to be able to graduate and go on to high school. So I had to meet with the 3 members of the school board. And my parents were not around at the time a little bit. My mom had to get a job, and it wasn't in town. And my dad was in bed, and so I went to this meeting by myself. And I get there, and these guys were mean looking, you know. And they go, "We can't graduate you. Go on. You missed too many days of school." And the one guy there knew my family, and he said, "I know this family. He's working." And the one guy says, "Well, what are his grades like?" And they say, "Well, he got straight Fs, because when you miss so many days, they give you an F. Now, if you get 100 on a test, they still give you an F because you missed too many days of school." So he says, "Well, what are your test grades?" And he looked it up, and he goes, "You go ahead and go." And I got to go to high school. I got passed on to go, but there were people who didn't like that idea. But that was the beginnings of Liberty Press, was the running the newspaper for the family. And then during the rest of the week, we realized we had this time, so we contact people and start printing. And so I was sort of in sales, I was sort of in production, and I ran the press. And then the truth is, when we got done, I did the delivery. I would take and deliver it around. So I do remember being tired a lot. I will say this. I remember going.
I'm sure.
So I remember going to school one day, and I just fell asleep. And I was sleeping, and the class got up and left, and I was just sleeping.
You're still there.
I was still there. They didn't wake me up.
So, Mark, you already kind of alluded to this, but tell us a little bit more about where your entrepreneurial spirit came from, especially because of the family situation that you kind of already alluded to with your mother and father.
I think it was kind of necessity. I will tell you, this is a fun story. When my dad had his heart attack, I was in 5th grade. And my mom, who had a teaching certificate so she could teach school, went and got a job. And the only place you could get a job after school started was in Delta. So she would drive to Delta Monday morning and come back Friday night. And my dad was in the hospital, so there was no parents in my house for a period of time. So the Oldham boys get together, and my sister went with my mom, so it was just the 4 boys that were home. And we had a home evening, okay? We didn't know what else to do. We had a home evening, and because my family was very diligent about that. And we had this genius idea. We kept thinking, if we all go get jobs, we can afford to pay the bills. But if we get a job and just spend the money on paying the bills, the money's gone. So we had 2 milk cows at the time, and we decided, this was our genius Oldham's boys' idea, we would take the money and buy additional cows, because then the cows would keep producing, so that money was not going to just be gone, it would be producing regular income. And so that was our vision of that meeting. But what was a funny story, so I get a paper route. I'm out in Genola. If you know where Genola is, I'm delivering. And that's not a great paper route to have, because the homes are all 2 miles apart, I'm riding along, and there's a guy out back milking this cow, and it's kicking him, and it's fighting it, and I'm watching him as I'm pulling up to their house on this long drive. I went over to him, and I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm milking this cow." And I said, "Looks like you're fighting with this cow." And he goes, "Well, this cow hates me, and I hate it." And he goes, "But I bought this cow so I teach my son how to work." I was 10 at this time. But anyway, so I said to him, I says, "Well, how about giving me the cow?" I said, "Tell you what, we'll give you all the milk you want." But the cow would give way more milk than they would drink. And so that night, when I came home, instead of riding my bike, I was leading a cow. And we picked up a cow right away. That was we had 2, so now we had 3. But it was that was the beginning of entrepreneurial. But it was sort of necessity. My oldest brother, Don, really is the guy who should be here. He is a true entrepreneur. He started our business. He encouraged his brothers to come in with him and talked us into coming and staying. He started several businesses. He really is an entrepreneur. We sort of got involuntarily recruited in, but then over time we learned a lot of lessons, and we did start businesses of our own. And but all those businesses, I will tell you this, instead of doing it individually, we still kept them in the family mold, and so they were under that heading. And so everything we've done has really been to build my family more than to build individual wealth.
Tell us what the advice was that your father gave you in working to family. We talked about this when we met last week, and I loved that advice, so I'd love for you to share it with the audience.
About working with family?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my dad would make this comment. He goes, if the goal is to live forever with your family, right, to be a forever family, he said, if you can't get along here, what makes you think you're going to get along there? So whatever it is, get over it and get along here. And my brothers and I are very different. If you meet me and you meet my brothers, our personalities are tremendously different. In fact, I think I'm the only true optimist in the group. They would, pessimists think of themselves as realists, so there is no pessimist really. Optimists are optimists. Pessimists are realists. That's really the way they would do it. And so they looked at me like I was odd. I was out there. But what's interesting, if you want a challenge in life, take over for an older brother. Because you never really are the older brother. I mean, I don't care what your title is. I can have my older brother working for me. He doesn't really work for me. Is that true, boys? He doesn't work for me. Even though I really am his boss. And by their vote, I became the boss of all my brothers. Even though I'm number 7, but I became by their vote. But in some ways, they love my optimism, but I just scared them to death.
But you got along based on your father's advice.
We
You
stick
guys
along
always
to
make
this
it
day.
work.
It's still the board. My dad's vision was true. It was to, I will say this, if you like money more than you like your brothers, it won't last. If you like your brothers more than you like money, you can do it. To me, that is the cardinal rule of a partnership. If you start counting money or I did more than you or whatever, dead. But if you like them more than money, you can really have a powerful team. And my brothers are a powerful team. They really are great. But I was the front guy, if that makes sense, even though I was younger. They pushed me up front. It was sort of like, again, but I will say this. I took over the businesses, and they weren't being very successful. Some people say entrepreneur. I've started a few businesses, but really and truly, my skill has been to come into a company that's struggling and turn it around. And I've done that lots of times, including in my family. I'd take over for a brother. Like how I took over the Journal wasn't like this big happy day. It was really struggling. And my dad, who hardly ever came to a meeting, came in and said, I think Mark should take over. And I was 26. And my brothers that were 33 and 34 are like, well, we're just dead. They didn't take it as a positive thing. And my dad goes, no, he should take over. So there was a vote. And the only 3 people that voted for me to take over was my mother, my father, and me. The rest voted against it. But in my family, my dad was so respected, and he rarely did something like this. That meant I was the new boss, even though they didn't vote for it. And I walked out, I was the boss.
You were the boss. So Anna, you didn't have too much involvement in the business, but you did a lot at home to support the business and make this all possible. Talk to me about how that relationship worked from a home perspective.
First, I want to say one other thing.
Please.
When we're talking about getting along, it was interesting when we got married. I had to deal with these feelings. We've got all these brothers, we've got all these wives. There's money involved and emotions and time spent at work and time spent out of the country and all the different things that were going on in the family. And I had to make the decision that I cared more about family than I did about money. And like he said, it would never have worked. Had I not joined that idea, it would never have worked. It would have caused feelings in our relationship and our relationships with family. So anyway, I'm the supportive role. I loved being a mom. I loved being home. Important things, teaching my children to work, that was really important to both of us. And the fact that I could be there, it was such a huge gift to me to be able to be there and be with my kids and be the one that decided what I was teaching and how we were raising children and be the influence in our home. So many times our kids would come home with a problem, and I think if I hadn't been there, how could I have advised them and taught them how to move forward when things were hard? Anyway, so that was the role I played. There were times where I was able to go and travel with him. And so we have great relationships all across this country with clients. And they're dear friends now. After going with him and traveling, I have an opportunity now that my children are grown. I have a great opportunity to go with him. And we spend a lot of time on the road and a lot of time at different companies that we own and that we're part of, and it's the most fun we've ever had. When our last boy left home, I said guilt-free dating. And we go and we love being together, and that's been great for us.
I will say each time I was going to take over a business, I would come home and I would look at Anna and I'd say, okay, are we in? Because she knew in taking over a business, there's no easy route. I can just tell you, when you take over a business that's failing, I would go to work and I would work 20 hours a day. I would do everybody's job. I would figure out what was happening so I knew who to eliminate, who to change. Because you got to do something different. You can't just keep doing the same thing, and you got to do it quick. And I knew I was going to be gone. And she knew after about the first or second time I took over a business.
I knew.
She knew what this meant if I said, so I'd come home and I'd look at her and go, I really want to do this.
I just knew the look. He'd look at me and I would be, okay, one more time.
How many times did you say one more time?
Only once.
Okay.
only once. There was one thing that he kept going back and fixing, and it was a huge commitment. And I was like, okay, we've done this 3 or 4 times, only one more time. I can do it one more time. But I knew what it meant to him. I knew the pressure that he was going to start packing. And so, anyway.
I will say something. When a business is running good, it looks easy. And everyone around goes, I could do that. Once it's running great. When it's running bad, it is really hard to figure out. It's hard to see where the problems are. And once it gets going, so being in a family business, it would get rolling really good. And so brothers would go, we want back in. We want to come run this. We want to be the publisher. So I was the publisher, then I wasn't the publisher. Then I was the publisher, then I wasn't. And older brothers would come in because they go, we can do it, right? But then they'd overspend, things would go and get running down. Then they go, you know what, you can take it back. So finally, after the second time I did this, she said, if they do it again, and I didn't, and they did it again, and I didn't take over.
I was thinking, let's do something else.
I didn't, but just recently, a year or so ago, we were driving down the road, and there was a guy. My style of selling was never, here's the product, here's the deal. My style of selling was to go into these people's businesses and help them run their business. And part of the solution was what my company did, but many times I'd walk in and say, look, we got to fire these people, we got to do, and I was on the board of many of the, and so part of why we were friends with these people is I revamped their businesses, and then we still got their printing, right? But it really wasn't, we'd go on a trip, and at the end of the weekend, Anna would say, you never mentioned Liberty Press one time. And I go, yeah, but we just got all their printing, trust me. But we really weren't talking about it. We were helping them run a business successfully, and they would give us their printing for it. But because we did that, we became partners in a way more deep way. But we'd go down the road, and I'd say, we were talking to a guy, and he was in big trouble. Pulled over. This was in St. George. I looked at her. She goes, go do it. But you know that meant a lot of time.
I knew the look.
And so
It's
we
like,
now
don't help
own
him.
that company, but part of it. But anyway, and it's doing great.
So Mark, going back a little bit to, Anna's support in home, how did having a tight ship at home help you in your business endeavors?
Well, I care more about my family than I do my business. It's easy. It's no decision. So if I was going to risk my kids in some way, but Anna was such a phenomenal mom, I would come home from a trip and the house was just running. In fact, I caused trouble when I'd get home because I wouldn't follow all the rules. The house was running pretty systematic.
He didn't like the kids to have to go to bed at night.
I'd be like,
I'd get him on a
time.
good schedule. We'd be doing good, and he'd come home, and everything was out the window.
So, but if I ever felt like I was doing something that was jeopardizing that, I would have backed off immediately. I do not care that much about money. That has never been my driver in my life was the money. It never has been. It's not now. I don't feel like it's the most important thing. I think money is a result of being successful, but if that's the reason you do it, it's pretty, I don't know, it doesn't motivate me.
That's awesome. And this question is for you both. You've talked a little bit about before you made, an acquisition or anything that you would come consult with Anna. Talk to me about just your communication as a couple and how that has just helped you guys survive challenges and hardships over the years.
Anna would remind me, we would have things we would learn, and I think this is true of everybody. There's principles that you learn, and then you get into a new situation, there's a new person there, and they start going, nah, and they try and persuade you away from those things you know are right. And Anna was the great, Mark, remember, we've learned this lesson before, don't make this mistake. She was that, we would talk a lot, but we would talk a lot about business, and she would hear me say things, and she was really the one going, don't you remember this? And I go, I do remember. She goes, then let's not. And it would help us make decisions. We'd hold true to the things that we knew were right. I continue learning businesses aren't that much different. I consulted every kind of business practice you can imagine, and the same principles made it become successful. It was crazy how they really followed a very similar pattern. And so it was just fun. A little over a year ago, we made the decision we were going to open Liberty Press in Nevada, in Las Vegas. And to start a printing company is a big endeavor because it's a lot of CapEx. It's a lot of equipment and millions of dollars, and it takes, David, you get a press, once you buy it, it's $450,000 to install it, just to get it put on the ground and plugged in and wired. And so doing it. But because of experience, we started a year ago, and it's doing $2 million a month, and it's been 1 year. I mean, but that experience of knowing how to make things go, my brothers don't even appreciate how fast that is. That is fast to take a company, and it's making money. It's profitable.
I think they do. I think they appreciate it.
Well, they may appreciate it, but I think they look at it like, that looks so easy. It wasn't easy, but it's a lot of learning over the years, a lot of failing, I have to say. But failing and not having that consume me. I did have a meeting one day with my brothers, and they called me in, and they said, Mark, do you not recognize the things you do that are wrong? And they went around the room, and they all told me the things that they had seen me do that were mistakes. Because they thought I was so optimistic, I just didn't see them. And it was pretty hurtful. It was a really challenging meeting for me, because I'm going, I'm killing it here. I'm running 3 of the businesses of the 4. They're the only 3 making money. And you guys are here saying, well, I remind you of this. This was a big mistake. This was a big mistake. And they were right. They were accurate. By the way, family's always pretty accurate. And when they got done with this, I remember thinking, well, you don't even know all the mistakes I've made. So I reminded them of some more. I said, I made these you didn't even bring up. And they were like, why would you do that? And I said, because I make mistakes. I learn from them. I don't regress. I don't turn around and go, I'll never do that again. I'm like, I just learn from it. And then I go forward. And I said, I'm going to make more mistakes than all of you combined. And at the end of this year, I'm going to drag you up the hill, and we'll all count the money at the end. And I walked out. And my feelings were hurt. I have to say, this was one of the harder days of my life that they would have at me. And I'm like, holy cow, why would you feel that way? But in truth, I just have to say, mistakes and problems cannot get you down. You just have to learn from them, and you got to move forward. And don't dwell. Don't just learn the lesson. Anna was the great person at reminding me, remember that lesson we learned? And we'd stick to it. But I'm not afraid of them.
Something else we learned early. He would go and be traveling, as we had clients all over the country. And he came home one time after being gone for a week or so, and then he had a lot of things on his mind, a lot of things going on, playing with the kids and kind of getting back into the family stuff. And then he went to work the next day, and he was gone for the next, week or so, back and forth at work. And he came home one day, and I said, okay, wait. You have got to share something with me. Every day when you come home, you need to share something with me, because if your life goes on without me, and I feel like I'm not included, it's going to hurt our relationship. So the fact that I was home with kids and had things going on, it was real important, even though he would come home and have to unwind, it was real important that he share some things with me about his day. And it was real important that I share some things about my day so that he had a good connection with the family, and I had a good connection with the life he was living when he was gone.
I love that. That's great. Just sharing things with each other, even if they're kind of separate, it's still that communication. Thank you. So Mark, going back a little bit more towards kind of Liberty Press and the business, I'm sure Printing Press has seen many pivots over the years, especially as things continue to go digital. Talk to me about how you guys have been able to stay relevant with those changes and continue to scale the business through the digital age.
Printing is the 3rd largest industry in the world. People don't know that, but it really is big. Everything you see is printed. There's really a variety from boxes to plastic, but printing is huge. And it was trillions of dollars. And as you all know, over the last 10 years of the digital revolution, printing has taken a beating, right? I mean, printing companies are going out of business left and right. That's why this building no longer has a press right there. They used to have a big old press right here in this room, or this next room. And so my view was there's always room at the top. If, the people that are 3rd, 4th, and 5th in the line are going to get wiped out. But if you're really the guy that is at the top, there's always people who want you to print. So that was our sort of just blind goal. Like, look, we just got to be the best. And everyone says that, but I mean, we tried really hard to be innovative and take care of people at a level they wouldn't leave. And we really do have customers everywhere in America. I mean, you would not believe, from Florida to, and I mean, when I say they're customers, they're family. They care for us. They take care of us.
They pray for you when you are dying, even if they've never prayed before.
I got COVID and almost died a year ago. And these people were praying for me, like begging the Lord.
One guy said, I've never prayed before, but I am praying for you. That was pretty touching.
They're great people. But we worked hard, but we've had to change. We printed phone books. Our number one thing we got was phone books all over the country. It was a huge industry, and it was super successful for years, and it was really a great move. As you know, phone books have gone, they're going away. And they are going away. That's not going to continue. It's slowed down. We now do a lot of phone books in very rural areas, but the big areas, they're all gone. And so we had to revamp. And it's a tough thing for a company to become something new, especially in printing where your presses dictate the kind of printing you do. So we had to buy different kind of presses, different kind of things. I take it as a big compliment that we've been able to make the turn from the newsprint type printing we did to now we're doing like almost all glossy and really fancy magazine and catalog. I'll tell you a funny story right now. The internet took over marketing in a big, big way, and Facebook and all this, and I still think it's wonderful. But there's this company in New York right now that we work a lot with, and they have discovered this new trend, and it's a new innovative idea. It's called print. And they started taking these people that only market online and print this really beautiful catalog and mail it out to these individuals based on their income and based on how they fit. And their response has been phenomenal. And they go around just talking about this new innovative, idea. And we're like, well, we're happy to be the new and up and comers, but it's print. But it really is having quite a response. The response to print programs was always about 1.5% return on your investment was considered very successful. These guys are having a 7% return on their investment right now. And so in the marketing end, they're the geniuses right now with the new idea. And that's to print a catalog and send it out to people, right? Which is new, right?
Really new. That's awesome. So Mark, you kind of alluded to this before, but as you've stayed relevant and made different changes, you mentioned to me last week your principles of winning. Tell us all what those principles of winning are and how they've helped you make strategic business decisions.
Buildings do nothing. Presses do nothing. People do everything. And so you really are managing people. It doesn't matter. I always wanted to be a coach. My dream as a kid was to be a high school coach. That was my passion. And I figured out I got to be a coach. It just wasn't sports. It was the same thing that was coaching people. And at Liberty Press, you could walk around and ask people how long they worked there. And I don't know the number, so I'm making this up, but it's got to be in the 20, 25 years as an average. I mean, lots of people work there a long time. And to me, but the principles of success are people have to be willing to do multiple things. When I walk into a company and I do this and I do that, and I go, nope. I have managers that just manage, and I go, nope. My principles are the manager has to know what to do. He has to be able to lead the team, do the training, and all my managers manage and work, every one of them. The new president of the company down in Las Vegas, I got down there the other day and he was pulling in the truck. He had just gone on to delivery, and he was delivering. Everyone's on the team, and teams, in my mind, that is a critical piece. When I'd walk into companies, I'd see all these employees. Another principle I would tell you is most people manage to have enough employees to handle their very busiest day. And they come in and go, I need these people. I have to have them. And I go, yeah, but what do you do with them the rest of the time? And so I pared it way, way down. And then you have to be versatile enough that the other departments may have to help you on your busiest day. But they way overspend. Every company I'd walk in on we'd almost cut in half the number of employees, and then everybody would be multitasking, and you could survive. And that's one of the quickest, easiest ways to say it. I would do this every time. I don't mean this rude, but in almost every business you come in, the wife, and I love wives, but the wife would do the accounting. And that works in the first few weeks because she makes the deposits. But accounting is a critical component to planning, to strategizing, it's just such a big piece. And how you look at the numbers can change everything, like everything. I'll give it quick. My brother Steve came in one day, and he's very conservative. He was our CFO. And he said, we need to tighten up on credit. And in fact, this year, we only made this much money, and we wrote off more than we made. So if we tightened up credit, we would have made this much more money. We could have made 50% more profit or something like that. And all the brothers were like, yeah, let's do it. Let's tighten her up, crank it down. And I'm sitting there going, oh, brother, this is crazy. And I'm the one out, as usual. So I said to him, what do you think the average write-off for a printing business is? Like, how much percent is a normal amount of bad debt? And I said, it's 4%. Like 4.2 is the number. And we were at 1.2 or 3. We were so tight already. We were like choking people on the ground, for every penny. But you still can't stop people from going out of business. There's no way to stop. There's no way to do business and have it be zero. So I said, what if we went from 1.5 to 4 and really loosened the reins up? Because we were very tight on this, and we wrote off this much money. I think if we did, we could do this much more volume. It would be almost like 10 times the volume. And at the end of the year, we'd make this much money. And that same board, and then 5 minutes go, that's a great idea. And so we went from, but that's the way accounting can have such a control of who you are. But I would always go in and I'd try and recruit a really great CFO and have them come in and work. But they wouldn't just be a CFO. They'd have to do other stuff. My CFO works in my layout department. He does my quality control. He does other jobs in the company. He doesn't get separate, because when they do, they start giving these crazy ideas like, let's just kill every customer if they don't pay cash up front. Well, in printing, when you do $1 million jobs, we do runs that are $1 million. No government entity. We do a lot of government printing. They never pay up front. They pay in 30 days. They're really good to pay, but they don't pay up front, right? So you're going to have to give out credit in our world, and they're big dollars, they're big numbers. And so we did back down. I think we only got to about 2.5% bad debt, because it really wasn't in my family's DNA to really give anybody a risky shot. But we did double the volume of the printing in the next year, because we were able to do it. Many more customers could actually do printing with us. So, but CFOs are a big deal. And then managers have to be able to work. They have to be able to do, so if someone leaves, they can do the job. They can train, because they're more realistic. You can get way unrealistic if you're just a manager, in my opinion. You can go in there and say, oh, if I was running that, I would do X. It would run this smooth. Then he's got to go prove it, and he has trouble. Next thing you know, he's really understanding, like, I did that yesterday, and that press just wiped me out. I got nothing done. So you're way more realistic if you're engaged. So those are some of the, I would come in and I'd say, what does this person do? And I'd see they just did this. I go, well, we're going to change it. And then they'd quit. A lot of times they wouldn't do it. They go, I'm not going to go out and get dirty or whatever. I go, it's okay. You're not a very good fit. But the people, every business I've come in on, I've got the people involved, and they're part of the solution of the work as well as being the management. That's one. And two, that we kept track of the numbers. Really, I'm a big deal on this planning and doing it. In a printing company, the little details make such a difference. Printing makes low profit. The margins are like 4 or 5%. So you have to do millions of dollars. And just 1 or 2 or 3 little details not being really captured, you don't make money. And so other businesses were easier. These phone book businesses were great. They were making 25, 30% profit margins, so they had a little more room for that sort of, not being tight. But if we go in and manage the same way, they'd make big money.
I think also by Mark knowing how to run the press and knowing a lot about it, I think the employees respect him, and that makes his relationship with them also really good.
Much more respectable. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the people say, oh, Mark's out of touch. This is the best one. Well, the head guy, they're out of touch. They don't know our problems. They don't know what we're doing. And every now and again, I'll go out there and I'll run the press. And I'll just put on the deals and I'll fire it up, and here we go. And it just gets rid of that completely. There's almost no machine I have that I can't run.
It was fun to watch the employees in Vegas figure that out, because they didn't figure he knew anything. And so he'd walk out there, and pretty soon he's talking to them and giving advice, and he's fixing a machine. And it really, the relationship with those employees is just awesome.
The first time they figured it out, I went there to work on a machine that was struggling, and I fixed it, and I changed the stuff and got it running, and I ran it. But I didn't just do it for a few minutes. I ran it that whole day. And I'm talking like 7 in the morning, and about 9:30 that night, I was still on the machine. And just for the record, my back was, I'm not in any condition to still stand there and do this kind of labor. People are tough, and I'm not that tough. I was dying. But when I walked out of the room, I turned around, and they were applauding. They clapped. And at that moment, I knew we were a team. We had captured them, because then I walked out and asked them to do something. They were in.
That's amazing. Wow, I love that. So one thing we had also talked about was just, like your son's involvement in the business and seeing that work. How has your entrepreneurial spirit rubbed off on your own children?
I don't know how much. I've had this thing in my life. I have always thought I was persuasive. I'm a sales guy by nature, and you can tell I have no energy at all. I'm low energy. I can't imagine me drinking caffeine. My wife would not allow it. I'm a very high energy person. I'm crazy. But anyway, what what happens is I would try and persuade people, oh, let's go do this. And I really made a lot of mistakes early on because people do what they want to do. And I tried to find more people. For example, I didn't teach them how to work. I could teach them how to do what we do, but some people just know how to really work. One person gets, and I found this. I'd hire a person, and with very low training, they'd go in, and everything would just, all the problems would go away. I'd hire another person and go in there, and they'd come back and mark, well, if I had this training, if I had this, if the company do all this. And I realized that people self-develop a lot. And we can teach them how to run a press or how to sell. There's techniques, there's things to do. But people are people, and they go back to where they're comfortable. And I gave up this idea because I could really, rah, we get them go up the hill, and for 2 weeks we'd charge the mountain, and then everybody go back to where they were comfortable. And I learned this lesson that I was like, well, try and find people. So we have a way we hire. We call them I won't give you the whole thing, but maybe after I'll tell you this. We have 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star employees, right? And it's how many things they can take and still get the job done. How many mistakes they can bump into. A 1-star, just the first thing comes, well, the door's locked. I can't do it. And a 2-star gets the key and, whatever. It's sort of a thing. So we try and find people that are not necessarily know what we do, but are people who really know how to work on their own, who just find ways to get things done. And if you hire those people, the greatest secretary I ever hired was named Betty Wade. And I was trying to hire a person that typed. I was a publisher of a newspaper. Typing and writing was a big deal. And in the interview, she goes, I don't really type. And I go, well, that's kind of, we go on to the interview. I'm like, I'm done at this point. And she goes, I'm not a very good writer either. I've been a housewife the last 30 years. I decided to get a job, and I heard about this, and I come and applied. She didn't have any skills that I was looking for. And before she left the room, she turned to me, because she knew she wasn't getting the job. She says, you know what? You will never have to tell me what to do. I go, what do you mean, Betty? And she goes, I will already know. I will see what has to be done. It'll be done. You will never have to meet with me, tell me what to do. So I went home that night, and I had 2 really qualified candidates who, one did shorthand and typed like crazy, 100 words a minute and all this stuff. She was a perfect person for the job. And I just was intrigued, and I hired Betty. And I never had to tell Betty what to do. And I kid you not, she had me meeting the president of this company and this appointment and this thing, and she still couldn't type. Okay, we got someone else to type. But she took care of me. She arranged for our vacations. She would know what people wanted to know. Like
I would call her and say, okay, he needs to have this day free. He's doing this and he's doing this. And between the two of us, we kept him.
I had a client I could not get through to, and I needed their business so bad. And he was a big Steve Young fan. And Betty got Steve Young to sign a jersey. He was at the Niners back when he was actually playing. And I went in to give him, and she gave me this. As I went to the meeting, she gave me this box. She goes, you're going to get in. I got you the appointment. And she made the appointment. She actually got me in. And I go in there, and I hand the guy, and he opens this, and it's a Steve Young signed jersey. And he goes, how would you possibly know that I'm this huge Niner fan? I grew up in the Bay Area. How do you know all this? And I go, I don't, but my secretary does. I'm telling you. When I say she was amazing, you cannot find another Betty Wade. She was amazing. But she didn't have a lot of these skills, but she knew how to work. She knew how to see what needed to be done. And she could walk in a room and see, this person needs this needs that. And she went to levels that no one would even think of. One of the greatest hires I ever made. And it really taught me that lesson of, skills are great, but knowing how to work and knowing how to think and knowing how to know what needs to be done and have the gumption to do it is almost an invaluable thing. My dad said, if everybody you hire makes you more money than you pay them, how many can you hire? Well, obviously the answer is unlimited, right? So if you can't afford to pay everybody you have, it means a lot of them are earning you more money than you pay them. So go find out who they are and have them go and find another job or something. That tells you right away how to look at it. And it changed my view of how to hire people. You hire people who know how to work. You hire them and bring that with them. And then you train them, and they're amazing. And so a lot of our people have been there a long time. Our CFO was not a guy who had done accounting. He was a CEO of a company. He was attention to detail. The guy would never quit. He'll be there 24 hours a day. He's learned how to be a CFO. But I didn't teach him how to work. I didn't teach him how to care. I didn't teach him the follow through. He brought that with him. And he's a great CFO. Hiring sons. These are my 2 boys, 2 of my 4 boys right here. They are way better entrepreneurs than me. I said you should probably interview them than me. I'm a fixer. I meet with them and they give me ideas. Dad, why aren't you doing this? I go, that's a great idea. I should do it. I do it all the time. Zach's new goal is to not give me as much advice. He's going to back it down. But it's not. I think a little bit it's who you are. You have to be willing to risk everything for your idea. In my mind, an entrepreneur doesn't care if he risks his home, he risks all these things. He just believes in his idea enough, he goes for it. And doesn't mean they make it the first time. But I've never really done that much. I just fixed things. When I started a business, I didn't take that big of a risk. I was able to afford it and go forward, and if it didn't win, I was okay. The guys like Ed, how I met these guys, Ed Rickers, Ed would sell his house. He would go down to his last car. He'd be like, let's do it. And we'd get in a decision. I go, Ed, you can't make this decision. You already have a business doing millions. We can't risk it all now. Let's just risk 10% or 20. I'm the one doing that. But my kids, I think they saw me take over businesses and win at it. And I believe that gave them the feeling that they could do it as well. So I don't have an answer what would create an entrepreneur. I kind of think my brother Don was born that way. He can't stop it. He'd still risk the farm today. And he's 79. And he would risk it all and not even think about it. And there's other that probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't risk it all. I'm not as much an entrepreneur as maybe you're hoping I was, but I'm a fixer. I can go into a company, and if it's not working, you give me. I can do it so fast. I went into this company we now own part of, and I went over there that day. We were talking to the owner, and he was like, "I'm going to lose my marriage. The business is in trouble financially. It's here." He's just telling me this, and I'm like, "Wow, this sounds terrible." And I looked at Anna, and I said, "Should I go help him?" And she goes, and she knew that we were on vacation. And she goes, we come to St. George for vacation. We just bought a home there, and she didn't want a business there because when we're there, then we'd not be working. And I love working. I love it.
Now we go down there and we work.
But I looked at her. I didn't do it overrule. I looked at her, and she goes, go do it. I went over to his business. I interviewed all his employees that very day. And in like 2 hours, we changed their whole, and they started moving forward. They started winning just immediately. But I've done it enough times that it's not like it was as hard. But seeing people and believing in people, I have to say this. I believe one of my greatest personal gifts is I can read people. And so when I'm in a meeting, I'm able to communicate with them because I can see what they're like, and I'll communicate in a way that they get what I'm saying. And then quickly I'm like, you know what? This is not the right person for this job. And I'm not being mean. I've had people that I've fired, and they're still my great friends. Because I'm like, look, let's help you do something that you really are great at. But you're trying this because you like me, but this is a bad idea. It's not working. I wasn't being mean, and I wasn't not seeing their greatness. It just didn't mean that they were meant to run a machine or whatever. You know, everyone's not meant for everything. And they get misplaced. Or they just don't work hard enough. Let me tell you, in a printing company, you know how many chairs there are? Walk around my building. How many chairs did you see?
I didn't see any while I was
There's
there.
only
except for the
chairs
one
in my
your
office. Out the rest of the company, there are no chairs. When they come in, they work all day on their feet. They never sit down. There's nowhere to sit down. It doesn't exist. And if you're not a person willing to work that hard at that level, you shouldn't apply at Liberty Press because there's no chairs. Pressman, there's no chairs. And that's a certain kind of person, right? And that's okay. There's room for them. But to me, seeing where people are at and being able to read that and communicate at that level is a critical piece. And then make your decisions and move. Don't just put it off. People know the truth most of the time. When you talk to them, they go, I realize this is not winning or working. It's not being mean. I don't ever see a reason to be mean. I just want you to know people are awesome. I love people. I hardly have met a person in this world that I haven't in a minute genuinely liked. Some people think that's fake, by the way. Like, how could he feel that way? Just between you and me, you don't have to believe me. If I met you within 2 or 3 minutes, I'd like you. And I'd start to want to help you win. And if you help everybody win in your company wins.
Thank you for sharing. I don't know why does this keep turning off? We're on now? Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask you guys one more question, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. So be thinking if you guys have anything you'd like to ask Mark and Anna. Just to kind of sum things up, I would love to hear you both bring a very unique perspective to entrepreneurship or fixing it, as you maybe like to call it. And I would just love to hear what advice you have to the wife of an entrepreneur or like the spouse of an entrepreneur. And Mark, just someone who has the experience from someone who has run a lot of companies and fixed a lot of things, just some advice to that can apply to a variety of industries.
Me first. One of my greatest loves in our partnership is he has my back. And I have his back. And I think it's really easy to be around people and they start saying negative things about their partner. And he was always so kind. He was always so kind and said kind things about me. And I noticed early on that he had my back. And there was a situation where a guy came up to me at a ball game, and he said something about my husband. I'm always waiting for my husband because he's always talking. And he was kind of being negative. And I looked at him and I said, well, you know, he loves people. He really loves people. And it kind of put him back in his place. And it was me having his back. And sometimes there are decisions that have been made that didn't work and that really big time didn't work. And between the two of us, we got through it together because I had his back when that decision didn't work. And I think that's one of the greatest things in a partnership, whether it is a marriage or whether it's business partners, whatever it is. We have a partner, and between the partners in that company, they all have each other's backs. And it doesn't mean that we're always right. It means that mistakes happened, but they're still there supporting each other.
I'm going to share another from my dad. My dad was a really wise man, and he said, criticism is the language of the devil. And he meant it. He says, gratitude is the language of God. And he said, in criticism that's true or false makes no difference. It kills everything in its path. And inside a business where there's criticism, it doesn't mean that people don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean everybody wins. But criticism is the death of everything. Death of relationships, death of business. And no one's perfect. Well, we knew one perfect man, right? We won't get religious, but we knew one. And the rest of us are all struggling. We all make mistakes. I've had businesses that didn't win. We've had investments. We've had things that didn't go well. I mean, I don't care that whoever you are, that's going to happen. And sometimes it's just timing. The economy just collapses, and we lost over $20 million in customers in 3 days when the 2009 collapse hit. We didn't lose one of those customers to another customer. They got cut out because they couldn't stand business. And yet I have all this equipment. And it's hard. What do? You can lay people off. You can't lay equipment off. And I have huge payments. I mean, these are not easy days. And I did nothing to deserve that. But that's just the reality of owning a business. It's going to happen to you. But I would just say this. Criticism, no matter how careful you are with it, whatever, it's like a grenade. Don't do it. And it's a real rule, and in a marriage especially. I mean, if anyone knows your weaknesses, it's your spouse first, and then your kids second, right? Your kids see your weaknesses from 100 miles, and they know them all, right? I hear my kids tease me all the time about my things I've done that were stupid, and they tease me about them. And it's true. That really is true. But I can tell you that happiness and success start with no criticism. And if it's in you, get it out of you. If you say it, you think it's funny, I can just tell you it wipes everything out in its path. I had 3 friends that started a business once, and they made a deal in writing that they would never say a critical word about each other. And there were times when he said, my tongue is almost bloody from me just chewing on that thing. It's just killing him. But those guys were wildly successful because they didn't spend their time having to overcome all this garbage. They just got rid of it. They just went on. And these guys even know who they are. They all know who they are. And these guys were, and I think of myself as really positive, and I'd be in their presence, and because they included me, right? They included me. I became a mentor to them in some ways. And they have a nickname for me, the sensei, that's their name, it's kind of silly. But anyway, and I found myself wanting to say something, and I go, oh, and it made me have to, and I don't think a critical person, and I was worse than them. I was like, oh, stop it. And they would just look at me like, really? But I would just say this, in a marriage, in a partnership, in a business, criticism is a killer.
All right, we'll go ahead and open it up for audience questions. We'll start right here. A microphone to him, Russ. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much to both of you. I actually wanted to touch, so I'm also a huge fan of gratitude. I love hearing that. I guess, what do you, from a managerial perspective, what do you call it? Do you call it not criticism, but sometimes there's room for improvement. Do you call it feedback? I guess is if there is room for correction or improvement, or if mistakes are made. I guess, do you have a different term for it, or how do you approach the conversation?
Well, training is training, and teaching someone a different way of going about something is not criticism. Criticism is saying what you did, from my perspective, is wrong, and sharing it with someone else. And your friends share your mistakes with other people, or your enemies. Your friends just share it with you. They go up to you and say, I'm not understanding this. Explain this to me one more time. You're doing this, and it's killing me, right? That is not criticism. That's telling them I'm not happy with it. And you have training. When I used to coach, I loved coaching, and I coached football, basketball, baseball. I've had some of the greatest experience of my life coaching youth sports. I just got to tell you, I love it. And I've had great experiences doing it. And I always felt this way. When a coach has something to say, like training to give, right? A new idea to share, they do it. When they run out of them, they just start yelling. As soon as I hear a coach over there, come on, guys, you hear him yelling over there, screaming, whatever. I'm like, he's out of ideas. He's done. He's done coaching. He's just screaming now. And I tell my teams, when that coach starts yelling, we've already won. Because he's out of ideas. That's a sure sign you're out of ideas. So when you go up to someone and say, look, let me show you how I think this ought to be done, that's not criticism. Or have them show you how they're thinking, and then you say, well, here's what I'm thinking, and you share ideas. That is not criticism. Is when I go up and go, that guy, and I share it with other people. And what are the other people going to do about it? They're nothing going to happen other than they just may think worse of that person or you.
Or share it.
Or they share it again, and it goes and gets bigger. None of that is helpful. So to me, training is the opposite, showing people, communicating, walking up and saying, hey, show me why you're doing this way. But it's always to the person directly, and you work it out. And that's not criticism. And you can get over big things that way. But in my mind, and you may even look at that person and go, well, that's their way, and now I understand it, and I'm okay with it or not. You can disagree without criticism. Criticism is sharing your opinion about it. And usually criticism is your version of, and it's not usually not the whole story either. The greatest stories ever, you get up and tell people, and then suddenly they realize it was way different than you thought, And it's embarrassing, right? Once you find out what they really were doing, and it was way over here, and you were way out of line. But in companies, criticism comes mostly from one department to the next. In printing, there's the sales department, and they're giving it all to, and it's going from customers down to this group, and then it goes through the plant. And every department up here causes trouble for the one here. That's just how it works. And then they criticize. And the people that learn not to and go find out, say, okay, and figure out a solution, they're the people I keep. The ones that just whine about it, because whining and criticism is the same thing. Criticism is whining just done, more vocal or something. I don't know. It's just whining to me. I hear it the same way. My ears are like, that's whining, and I don't like it.
Okay,
Great,
we
thanks.
have time for just one or two more questions. It looks like there are a few hands over there. Does anyone else have their question?
Just a quick question on you had your dad's vision, kind of got your family lit up, and now you're moving into your third generation. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the transition of that original vision to the third generation, and kind of what's your approach?
All my kids have worked for me at a time, for some of the time, but I only have two that work with me now. They're sitting right here, these two. The others don't. And it's the greatest thing in my life to work with my boys. I have to tell you, I love it. I want them to take over everything I do, work with me. We're working hard on having them, take over. And learning the lessons, and the faster they go, but no, I think it's you have to note this. The company deserves the truth. And if one of your kids isn't really the right person to take over, you can't let them take over. You have to respect the company. And there are people who do that. They just say, well, it's my kid, so he takes over. That is not right. The kid has to earn it. The kid has to be the right person to be in the chair. And if not, you got to tell them the truth. So even though that might be my desire, my boys know they got to earn it. They got to be the right person, or they won't be that guy. I'll put someone else there, because the truth is critical in a company. Nothing ruins a company. We take over, we have a company right now, it's a big competitor over in Colorado. Well run, I love the guy, he does a great job. His son's taken over. We're laughing about the days before we get all the business because he's, no way he's ready to fill his dad's shoes. I mean, we're laughing about it, and everyone knows it, just like the vultures are just going around waiting for that to collapse. But having the kids know that's what they got to do, and they got to earn it, and they got to be the right person, because respect is never given, it's always earned. I don't care what you do, you can have a title, but if they don't respect you, you'll go nowhere. My kids have got to earn the respect of the people so that they take over, it goes forward. If they don't, I won't put them in that spot. I mean, I answered the question, but to me, they got to know, they got to be that person, and if they earn it, they'll get it. And I'm excited. But working with my boys, traveling with them, doing stuff, it's the best. It's awesome.
Thank you guys for those questions. We're just going to wrap it up with our final question that we always ask our guests. Thank you. The final question that we always ask our guests is, what is something fun that your success has allowed you to do?
Want me to go first? Something fun. Well, it has allowed us to spend time with our kids in fun ways. Working with them is great. We travel back and forth. I get to go a lot right now, and we get in these great conversations, and that's been fun. It's been fun having our whole family together and be able to spend time that way. I don't know. What were your thoughts?
I think, I think helping our kids out, I think there's ways to help them that hurts them and ways to help them that helps them, right? Because you can give them a lot of help and then they end up being needy. But success has allowed us to help them get homes and things like that. And we try to do it in a way that they still carry the big bulk, but all my kids, all 5 of my kids have a home. I think that's huge. In today's world, they're hard to get, and they all have a home. And that was a big item to me, maybe not to everybody, but I mean, you may not know this, but I grew up in a home that wasn't even a house, kind of. I mean, it was, my parents bought it, it was condemned, and didn't have a porch. We cut a tree and that was our porch. We stepped on it and went in the house. And then my dad had his heart attack. We were going to knock this house down and build one, and then Dad had his heart attack. So that's what I lived in until I went on my mission. And it had plastic windows, and there were the bullet holes in it where people had shot it driving by when people didn't live there. We plugged them with like newspaper and things so it didn't get cold. I mean, we lived in a pretty, Supper Santa hit my house every year. I told them when I was in the seminary council, and that's who does instant, and I looked down there, and the very first name for Supper Santa, Albert Oldham. That's my family. And I thought, I'm not going to go in my own house. So I sat out in the front in the truck. They went by my house and delivered Supper Santa. I was very grateful, but I just thought, I'm giving myself a gift, It didn't seem right. But, I mean, to me, having my kids all have a home was a huge thing. I thought it was a big, stabilizing thing in their life. So traveling with my kids and having them see things, they know a lot of the business people. I got to share this one story. I have a client in Alabama, and he is a guy that his wife never lets him be alone because she's afraid he'll mess around. And he might, I don't know, but that's her view. And so she goes everywhere with him, right? So I'm traveling all the time, and I get to places, and they live in Dothan, Alabama, and they have a big motorhome, and it's a multi-million-dollar motorhome. And I go to Orlando, Florida to a show, and I have a room, and next thing I know, Walter and Cindy pull in, and they're like, Mark, you're staying in the motorhome with us. And I'm like, well, I have a room. Nope, you're staying here. I go to Atlanta. Anywhere that's in a 4 or 5 hour drive of their house, if I'm there alone, they drive up there. And finally I said, well, what are you doing? And they go, well, we just couldn't bear it if you stepped out on Anna. So we are here to make sure you're good. And you're staying here because you shouldn't travel alone. And I go, I'm not really having a hard time with this. I mean, I'm not really a mess around dude, And but you want to know who your friends are? Those are your friends. Those are people that really do care about you. They spent the 3-4 days in Atlanta while I'm at this show. Just every night I'd come stay in the coach, sleep on the couch in the coach. But they're friends. But So my kids get to meet those people, and they've met a lot of my customers. Before Luke went on his mission, we actually had an airplane for a while, and it was a Pilatus and fly over the country, and we did a lot of travel in it. And we took my family, and we actually went and visited customers for that week. We stayed at customers' houses all over the country, and they got to meet people that I know. And I don't know, that was really cool. And those people shared what I was like in business with my kids. They heard people go, and they tell the truth, of course. They joke and tease, but I don't know. Those are to me, that was fun.
Those are really fun experiences. Thank you guys so much for joining us today and sharing your stories and your nuggets of wisdom. We're so grateful for your time. We want to just give you guys a little gift, a token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, and we'll turn the time back over to Russ. Everyone give them a round of applause.